should be broadcasting now just fine.
Okay. Go to the other window. Other than that one, then just close that when I'm done.
Yeah, yep. There's a red button at the bottom of that window now to stop the recording, and that will close it out.
Okay, cool. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
It.
Yeah.
Cheers.
Thank
you.
I've been to enough now.
That's cool. I appreciate it.
Oh my! Just take a picture of it.
I have some somewhere. Like, I think
You want to wear that mic, or do you want to talk here?
I can just talk here. I think.
Whatever's possible.
Yeah, that'll work.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, I've never used one of those.
What, one of these?
I've used one of those, not those.
Do you want me to put it on you?
No, that's okay.
Okay,
I'll be kind of near the. I have to flip slides a lot, so I won't be like pacing around like Steve Jobs or anything. That'll be good.
Oh, it's there.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
That's cute.
And I'm there if you ever need help.
All right, I appreciate you, man. Thank you. All right.
All set?
Yeah,
right,
I think we got all the technical issues worked through.
Good.
So
Did the hangouts happening? And all
yeah,
that? Okay.
it should be. I think we're all good.
What are you presenting?
Designing systems instead of pages.
That's something like we know about, but it's like communicating sometimes with like, the higher ups. Anyway.
Yeah,
It's a problem.
yeah, it's not easy, but cool. All right, it's 11 o'clock, so I will go ahead and get started. My name is Todd Ziegler, and I'm the owner and founder of the Brick Factory, which is a web development firm based out of Washington, D.C. We're about 20 people. We primarily work with nonprofits, advocacy groups, brands, and trade associations. Interesting, just as an aside, we recently moved into a new office at the end of last year in downtown DC. We're in the McPherson Square area of downtown DC. So for those of you not familiar with DC, that's about 2 blocks from the White House. So we've had somebody else move into the neighborhood. So this year has been kind of a mix of right outside our office window, protesters, security, and kind of intermingled with your typical tour groups from the Midwest. So it's been an interesting year, but that's not what we're really talking about, obviously. What I wanted to talk today about is how our website process has evolved. Our web design process has evolved over the last 5 years. It's changed pretty dramatically. And so kind of as an intro to that, I just wanted to kind of talk about what it looked like kind of in 2010, how we kind of approached design. Oh.
Plug it back in.
Unplug and plug it back in? Okay. All right. Is the technical... All right, I'll just go without the present mode. That seems to work. Let me try to present again and see if that. Nope. All right, we'll just do it this way. Hopefully, it'll work when I go to the website itself. So our website process, kind of prior to 2010, we had things pretty well defined. We knew what we were doing. Basically, we were building fixed width websites that were kind of basically static. And we kind of knew how we were doing, what to do and how to do it. And our team had basically worked together from 2000 to 2010. So we kind of worked on a process, and it more or less worked. And the kind of process, which I'm sure those of you that have been doing website design for a long time are pretty familiar with. So you would basically identify the key pages on a website, your templates, and you'd create designs, static mock-ups that you would show the client. The client would review, and all of this was typically done for desktop. The client would review this, they'd provide feedback, you'd do a couple of rounds of feedback, they'd approve it, you'd build the comp out into HTML, CSS, and Drupal, you'd do some polish, drop in some rollovers, some other things, do quality control, and then you'd launch the site. And then you'd, of course, celebrate. It's not easy. It wasn't easy, but it was fairly straightforward compared to what we're dealing with now. Kind of the biggest problem we had was really our front-end developers kind of fighting Internet Explorer. That was kind of our biggest problem by late 2010. Things have changed. It's not that easy. Things have gotten more complicated. How have they gotten more complicated? The most obvious way is that we're now dealing with screen resolutions, and we're dealing with dozens, if not hundreds of devices as well. So whereas in like 2010, when we're designing a website, 90%, 95% of the traffic was coming from desktops and laptops. Now that number is more like 50. So literally the mobile experience and the tablet experience is almost half of the user base. So we can't just build fixed width static websites and design that and using that old process I described. The other thing that's changed is that the interfaces that we're putting together have become much more complicated. So, you know, a fixed width static website from 2010, today, the user interfaces are more complex. And really what we're designing is applications with interactivity and different states and movements and scrolling effects, et cetera, as opposed to fixed websites that are simple. So, and clients are demanding this, and our team wants to do this because it's more interesting. So, you know, kind of 2012, 2013, how do you deal with this increased complexity? Our initial kind of response was, we'll just do more page comps. So that's awesome. Instead of doing 10 page comps at desktop, we'll now do comps at desktop. We'll do some mobile comps, and we'll do a bunch of variations to demonstrate this interactivity. And so, I mean, at our firm, where that process ended up is we had a couple of websites where we literally did 100 comps. Literally 100. And even a simple website, relatively simple website, we were doing 30 or 40. And it goes without saying, that process doesn't scale. It doesn't scale for the designers. Asking a design team to kind of manage 100 different page comp variations is a big ask. And then also, just as importantly, asking a client to review all that is mind-numbing. And it's unnecessary, and it's time-consuming. So it doesn't scale. The other thing we found is that even if it did scale, what we're showing the client isn't actually an accurate representation of what the website looks like. We're showing these kind of static pictures of the pages that'll make up the website. After we built it in Drupal and implemented it and looked at the prototype or the beta that we've built in Drupal, it doesn't really look like the comps anymore. We find problems we didn't anticipate. We find areas where the design was just, we made wrong decisions in the design process. And then we have this process where we have to go review, et cetera, and spend a lot of time cleaning it up anyway. So we've done a lot of work creating something that's actually ineffective at communicating what the design of the site is going to look like. A big problem, kind of even beyond kind of the process of designing and showing the client the deliverables, is that clients don't want to be limited to page templates anymore. Let me kind of walk through an example. So one of our clients is an organization called African Parks. They're this really fantastic nonprofit that manages wildlife parks in Africa. They manage around 20 parks. So they kind of basically create space for elephants, lions, et cetera, to live. And they had this really cool project around 6 months ago where they wanted to build a landing page or a microsite, basically, about this translocation of elephants. They had 500 elephants that they were moving from one of their parks to another. They were moving them about, I think it was 500 miles. And they basically had gotten a lot of media attention about this. Prince Harry was involved. So they wanted to build a landing page kind of devoted to that. And so they came to us and they said, here's what the landing page needs to look like. We want a description of the project. We want video of the project. We've got a video we want to include. We've got an email sign form. We've got lots of photos. We want to do a photo gallery. We've got maps showing kind of how things move. We've got links. We want to add an area where we automatically show links to related articles and stories. And so this site, we don't have that page. We didn't build that template. So inevitably, what do? We have to do more comps. So we have to go through this process again. where we're talking to them about the design, producing another page level comp in different sizes for different devices, getting their approval, and then we have to go build it, spend 2-3 weeks building it. So something that theoretically should be relatively simple, that the client would like to be able to do themselves as needed, is becoming a process. We're looping back into the page-based process. That doesn't work. This page-based process of looking at everything you're designing as a page just doesn't work anymore. It doesn't work for designers, it doesn't work for front-end developers, back-end developers, and it doesn't work for clients. So how do we fix it? And the title of the presentation kind of gives that away. Design systems, not pages. And we're obviously not even close to the first people to talk about design systems. This has been something that's been talked about a great deal. A lot of people have written a lot of great things about this, given great presentations. So I wouldn't pretend to be the inventor of this or even one of the thought leaders in this. But what I do want to do is kind of share our story about the process we've come to. And for us, what makes what we're doing a little different is that we really needed an approach that's Drupal-centric. We're a Drupal shop, and we wanted something that really made sense in the context of Drupal. So just kind of going over the requirements of the solution that we came up with, wanted something that was easy for clients to understand. Yes? Oh, I can go back to present. Good, thank you. It probably won't work now. It does, thank you. All right, if it goes back, just tell me again. So we wanted something that was easy for the clients to understand. We didn't want to talk kind of in vague concepts that caused their eyes to roll over. So we wanted something that they could understand and grasp. We wanted something that basically also established a common language and common themes throughout the process. And so what that means for us is we'd found that our design process, where we'd come in the beginning and do design work, was often really disconnected from our actual process our front-end developers used to build the site, our back-end developers used to build the site, and frankly, what the content management experience looked like when the clients had access and started playing and building pages themselves. So we wanted something that made sense and was consistent throughout the entire process of the site build and the site maintenance afterward. Our front-end development team wanted something that wasn't tied to a front-end framework. So we had done a lot of work in Foundation and Bootstrap. Basically, they didn't want to work with those frameworks anymore. They wanted to do something where they had complete control over the HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, no limitations of what they could do, and create really streamlined CSS. So what does this look like? Design deliverables, and I'm going to kind of walk through the entire kind of process and show you even the back end. But our typical design deliverables now are we're trying to basically be very streamlined. We're trying to produce minimal design work up front, enough to kind of where the client knows what they're getting into and knows what we're building, but not so much that we're actually showing them the entire site as PSDs before we start building it. So we're trying to quickly get to actually building the site, working in Drupal, and showing an actual working version of the site. So the design deliverables that we produce first, overall style guide showing direction. So what are the fonts, what's the typography, what are the overall styles we're using on the site. We then convert that into a living style guide and pattern library using Hologram. So we have kind of an online style guide that the client can reference throughout the process. We break the site, when thinking about the site in the initial kind of design planning stage, we break the site into what we call widgets. Other people have different words for these. Widgets is what we came up with, or not came up with, widgets is what we choose to call it. And basically, widgets are the reusable components that are used to build pages. Very simple analogy is they're Legos. So we are basically designing Legos that the client can then use to put the pages together themselves however they want to. And I'm going to walk through very specific examples on a site that we've built. We then provide designs for very few select pages. The one thing I'll say about this is we try not to be very specific about the pages that we show the client, the few sample pages we show. The reason for that is that, in my experience, unless the client's really savvy, they often have trouble distinguishing between design and content. So when you're doing a page-based design approach, one of the biggest problems is you're like, here's what your about page looks like. And I would like you to react to the structure. and the elements and the features I have on the page. And you put in a photo, some sort of sample photo, you put in some text, and all your comments are going to be about the photo used and the text. So we try to get away from that and really just show pages that are very generic and that don't actually correspond to the pages that we're going to build. We're going to show that when we're in Drupal. So I'm going to walk through an example from that same African Parks client. So this is actually a website that we're building now. I think it's going to launch it's supposed to launch in early July. So I'm going to kind of show you a preview of what the design looks like and walk through the deliverables that we produce for this client. Let me get to the other browser, actually. I'm going to show this in InVision. It's a little easier. All right. So the first deliverable that we talked about is the style guide. So here we're kind of establishing a text color. We're establishing some background colors that we're going to use throughout the site with the widgets we're using. We're establishing some button colors, showing kind of your typical H1 styles and text formats, telling them what text we're using, showing bullets and numbered lists. Sorry, I should have brought a mouse, block quotes, some buttons. I'll go through the menu in a second. And then we're also establishing the grid. So we're kind of establishing what the grid is, what our max width is, columns, gutter widths, and margins. So we're walking through the client what this means. And usually this is obviously tied in with their own brand identity documents, but we're kind of showing them this, getting basic buy-in on the style guide before we kind of move on to our other deliverables. Then on this client, we also showed them drop-down menus. So we designed the menu system. And I've got an about drop-down, got a parks drop-down, got a work drop-down. So just kind of showing them what the menu system looks like in desktop. We're also showing them what it looks like on mobile. So here you have just a menu. There's what it looks like on the first level. This is, InVision's made this go gray, but obviously this is mobile. And then third level. So we're kind of showing the basic navigation system and style guide so they get an idea of how the site's going to work. Then we get into the widgets. So African Parks, you know, they manage parks, so they have some pretty stunning photography and videos. So a big part of this project is figuring out ways to show that off. And so this is what's called the header widget. So basically what this widget's to basically an option that the client can use to introduce any page. So this appears at the top of a page they might build. And we've got a couple of variations. Here we've got this version, which is obviously this is a JPEG, so this is just rendering as it renders, but this is meant to be full screen. We've got another version that's basically meant to fill up half of the user's screen. So for different pages, they can choose different options. We've got another version here where they can basically upload multiple images and create kind of a slideshow that you can use. So they can create a slideshow to start a page. Got another version where they can configure, they're able, as they create the widget, to configure where the text orients. So if they've got an image here, they're orienting the text left. Here's another option where they're orienting the text in the bottom. And then lastly, we give the content managers options as they add widgets to choose light or dark text. So in this case, the image is light, so they've gone with a dark text option. So this is just a widget that's meant to basically be an opening to a visual page. The next widget that we have is called text intro. So some of the pages are just going to be text. They're not going to have this giant image to start the page. So like a press release or something like that. So here we've got a style showing the site, the headline size, and then showing kind of the teaser text size. Here's another version where we've got a slightly smaller headline size for longer headlines. Here's a version where we've got a list, kind of a taxonomy term. So there's a news content type, and this is an article. And we're showing the date if they want to configure the widget to include that. And then here we've got an example of what it looks like when it's from a third-party news source. So that's a widget that you would use for a simple page. Then we show them, this is the text widget. So this is our core widget that you use to add text to a page. This is pretty exciting. So we've got text. Then we've got text with a headline. Then we've got text with a headline and a button. And then we're showing kind of some of the styles within the text. So here we've got this kind of pull-out style that you can configure in the widget. And then here we've got an image that appears within the widget. And then going back to those background colors that I showed you in the style guide. As the client adds the widget, they're able to choose what the background color is of the text area. So they have the option to have a text background area that's blue in this case. So, you know, if for whatever reason they want a text block with a blue background, they're able to configure that in the CMS. Then we have a widget, photo widget, for adding kind of photography that appears outside of that text area that we showed. So here we've got just a simple image that basically is meant to fill the entire width of the text column. Then here we've got the same thing, except it's got a caption with it. Here's a version where they can add it and have it break out of the column a little bit. And then lastly, we've got a version where they can basically set the image to go the full width of the page. So the content manager, as they're adding these photos, can choose how they appear and the kind of experience that they're creating. Another widget that we have is photo gallery. So if they want to add a photo gallery to a page, this is just a simple photo gallery where you scroll through photos. Here's a version, same photo gallery where we've configured it to be a blue background instead of the white background. Here's a version of the photo gallery where they can add text associated with the photo. So if they wanted to tell a visual story, they would be able to do that with this variation. Here's a version of that with the blue background, and then here's what happens when you click on that full screen option, where we go full screen and you've got the X to close out of it. So they can basically use this to add photos to the site, photo galleries to any page on the site. As a nonprofit, one of the biggest things they want to do is build their email list. So we've created a widget called Email Signup that they can insert anywhere on the site. So here's a version of the email signup with a photo of two elephants that are friends, obviously. Here's one on a simple blue background. Here's one on a simple white background. And as they add these widgets, they can customize every aspect of this. So they can change the headline, they can change the text, they can even change the button to kind of be whatever they want. Here's another widget. We call it, this is called call to action. So if on a page they want to add some sort of call potentially to link to a donation page, link to some third-party news source or some other page, and they want to be prominent, they can insert this widget to do that. Once again, we got our variations. We've got a version with a photo background, and also I just add any photo that they add to the site, they have the option to add this credit that appears via CSS. We've got the blue background, then we've got a version photo with 2 buttons. So they can add up to 2 buttons to this call to action option. They can also do this without a button if they just want to kind of use this to pull out text. A big problem we've run into on the sites we've built is clients want to be able to kind of dynamically create related news to insert. And they want to do this kind of ad hoc. So we've created this module called, or this widget called Content Feed that allows them to do that. This variation kind of has a full story that's kind of featured at the top, and then it shows kind of 3 secondary articles below. This version, which is really kind of the crux of what we're doing, allows them to basically, they can choose how many rows of results they want to show. They can show 3, 6, 9, or 12. They can turn on or off these filter options. So they can basically set this to not show any filters or to filter by content type and various taxonomy terms. Like in their case, parks is one of their taxonomy terms. And then they can add or remove pagination. So they can have this be pagination. All this is in Ajax. So they can create something as simple as just, here's the 3 most recent articles that are press release about this park, and just configure that in Drupal and add it to the page. Or they can create something that just doesn't have any filtering and it's all the most recent articles of any particular content type that they want. A couple of other variations. This is just showing the filters. And here's a version where they've turned off those teaser images. So if they don't have something that's visual, the client can just basically say, I don't want teaser images, and configure the widget that way. This one is called Static List. So this is basically a similar concept to the content feed, except this just allows them to manually create kind of list of content. We've got a couple of variations here as well. One with teaser image, title, and a good bit of text. Very similar one here, where there's no teaser image. And then we've got a more visual version where the client can upload images and have the text appear for kind of a call to action area that they can configure and add to any page on the site. Donations are a big part of what they do, obviously. So we've created this donation widget that they can add. And as they add this widget, they can upload different photography, change the language, even configure the amounts of the donation options so that they can kind of test different pages. This really facilitates A/B testing. So they could create 6 different versions of this page and go through and do an A/B test with different photography, different language to see which performs best. And they can easily insert this on any page. So that we just kind of design this whole experience. So we've got page 1, page 2, page 3, which is the actual credit card page. And we've got a version of this that's a little thinner, but doesn't have a visual background if they want something a little more subtle to insert on some pages. This kind of widget I'll show you. This is kind of a custom widget that's meant to be on the home page. It's basically a listing of an interactive listing of their parks. So we've got kind of this, we're obviously showing Africa, and it's showing where the park is in the context of the country, and then you can click on or scroll through these different the different parks, and this animation occurs. So this isn't really something that's reusable or configurable. It's more just kind of a reusable element that we gave them the option to kind of add to any part of the page that they want, almost like you'd see with a traditional block in Drupal. So there's more widgets I'm not going to go through. There's probably 6 or 7 additional widgets that I won't show that are less interesting, but that's kind of the basics in terms of the widgets that we'll show the client. The next thing we'll show is actually what some of the pages look like. And as I said, we're trying to be vague, kind of. We're trying to show them conceptually what the pages looks like instead of saying, here's what your about page looks like. So here we've got that really simple text intro widget. We've got some text, we've got a photo, there's that note thing I was telling you about. Here's one of those call to actions with the photo. Got some more text, got a big giant photo that's meant to fill the whole screen, and then we've got an email sign up, and then the page is over. So that's just a really simple page that they can create on their own that's got some really nice elements, and they can create this in Drupal by themselves. So here's an example of a news page. We've got that content feed widget that's configured to kind of show a good bit of results. We've got pagination, and then we've got an email sign up at the bottom with the footer. So that's just an example of how you can create kind of a news page just through the system. We did show them the home page, and this is the only page that we really did that's more detailed. Here we've kind of got this page intro, and this is actually, I didn't mention this, but the header here, actually, in addition to photography, you can have videos playing. So you can upload a video to the CMS and have kind of a background video play as well, which they're going to do a lot of because they have some beautiful videos. This is actually it's kind of a still from a video. The site will have a video as the intro. We've got an Our Work section, which I didn't show. We've got that interactive I showed you. We've got some news. We've got the email sign up with the friendly elephants. We've got and then we've got a call to action kind of pulling things out. And then we've got a partner list. And that's kind of the home page. So our goal here, and that's, we did a few more comps, but our goal here was, this is a pretty big site. This is not a simple site that we were building for them. Our goal was to kind of try to minimize the upfront design time. Give them an idea of what things will look like so we can get into developing the site in Drupal. We then build the site in Drupal, build the sample pages, and get them in the CMS, reviewing the site live. And we also build into our estimates time for our designers to go in before we show the actual beta site to the client, review it, and make adjustments to what they see in Drupal. So instead of having to anticipate everything, we kind of get a first version, have our front-end developer kind of handle some of the base responsiveness, and then do a pretty extensive polish phase in Drupal to try to make it as polished as we can before we show it to the client. So we're trying to transition time. Instead of trying to anticipate everything up front, we're trying to do minimal work up front, just designing the basic system, and then basically fine-tune and spend more time after we've got a beta in Drupal to do the development. The other thing I wanted to show is, and this is a different example, but basically what the content management experience looks like in Drupal. So we kind of build these widgets using a module we developed called Stacks, which is available on Drupal.org. There's other ways to do this. You can do this with paragraphs. I think some people are going to kind of talk about that. I'm sure people are going to talk about that. But we have our own way of doing it called Stacks, but there's many ways to kind of skin this cat. So this is a different site. This is an example site that we've built that also uses the widget system. It's a fake site about polar bears. So yeah. So let me go to the back end. So here's naturally we've got a Drupal security warning because why not? All right, so here's an example of what the backend looks like. So you kind of see these widgets. So these are just kind of stacked elements that you can insert on the page. So we've got a header widget, a text widget, an image list, etc. I can drag and drop these to kind of change the order. And then at the bottom, I can click on Add New Widget. I can choose a widget type, and then basically go through the process of adding a new widget. It'll automatically get entered at the bottom. I can drag and drop it up to the top. The other thing we've allowed in this, the other thing we have is you can reuse existing widgets. So if you've got an element that's going to repeat on multiple pages, you can manage that through one system. So I can use the same kind of header in different places, or I can use the same donation call on different pages, so I only have to maintain it in one spot. So let me just kind of show you a couple of very simple examples of how this works. Let me get out of that. All right, so I will just go to a basic text example here. And all right, so this is, I'll just kind of change. So this is just kind of showing what a basic text widget looks like. There's your text, there's the image, and I can basically go in and change the image alignment to left to right. So I'll just kind of make that change. I click update. That's updated. Then I'm going to go down to the related articles area. And so this is that content feed widget that we talked about. Here we've kind of got the setup for the different options. There's, do you want the content feed to have kind of the visual, or do you want it to have the non-visual? And then I go to next, sorry. And here I have the option to kind of configure what I want to show. So I have the ability to enter this text. I have the ability to choose which content types I want to appear in the results. I have the ability to go into advanced settings to set how I want to order the content. Do I want to order chronologically or via alphabetical? I have the option to turn pagination on or off. I have the option to enable filtering, that kind of Ajax filtering, etc. And I have the option to kind of set how many results that I want to show. So basically from the back end, we've given the content manager the ability to create a pretty complicated related content area themselves, just configuring the widget. And so kind of going back to that example I gave of the elephant site build around their translocation, that process that I described, that's 2 to 4 weeks where we're doing more page design, the client now can build themselves using these tools that we've given them through the widgets. So that's really, I don't know, I think that's pretty cool. So that is pretty much it. I'm going to go, I think I have some closing thoughts somewhere in here. So in terms of how this has worked for us, I'll say that, you know, designing websites is still really hard. You know, the process isn't simple, but what we found is that the way we're doing it now has kind of tied things together. It's enabled us to kind of get through some of the pain of doing page-based design and come up with a lighter set of deliverables that cause things to go more quickly. And just as importantly, this process has allowed us to kind of empower our clients to really build sophisticated, nice pages themselves without kind of us having to do as much of the kind of constant grinding in Drupal that you traditionally have to do when building new elements that don't quite match your page-based system that you would normally create. Yeah, and so that's pretty much all I got. Any questions, any comments, thoughts? Yes. Yeah. Yes, you.
Just ask, when you were showing the vision, were your designers using
They're using primarily Illustrator, and it's kind of, that's just kind of their personal. We have some designers that use Sketch, some that use Illustrator. Just kind of depends on the client. We're not. Yep, exactly. Those are just PDFs. And the thing I would say, just kind of about that, is I know a lot of people create really complicated demos in InVision, and we've certainly done that. We're trying not to do that. We're trying to basically do pretty basic comps, and then just build that in Drupal and get to Drupal as quickly as possible. That's kind of our philosophy. You, sir.
Yeah, having a piece-by-piece design approach is lovely. How do you control SEO? How do you maintain a high level of SEO? Because what if on one page they don't do a big hero showcase blog, they just get into a regular article?
Yeah, I mean, I would just say that the widgets that we've constructed are all kind of, we're using our core elements, H1s, H2, kind of strategically, and the client does have the option within the text widget, as an example, to configure kind of headers, etc. And we're also doing kind of a SEO-friendly kind of overall page structure, that works with SEO. But I do think that's a valid concern, because the client could basically very easily we're giving them freedom, and they have the freedom to create pages that are not SEO friendly if they choose to. So that is a downside. Sure.
Second to that, when you bring in all these widgets, analytics opportunities within event tracking or goal conversion tracking?
Yeah, and part of the process, yes, definitely. So part of the process, when we're kind of creating the widget system, there's a lot of configuration options that we build in. So as an example, as we're building the widget, if we plan whether it may need an event, we'll add the event tracking. For the email list widget, as an example, we have the option to kind of dump for the client to choose which MailChimp list to dump the signups in. So each of the widgets, we kind of have to really think through how we build it with that in mind. And we have to think that kind of through the whole time. It does require a good amount of planning. Yes?
How, if at all, do you manage kind of like that, like maintenance, kind of setting your clients up for success? Obviously, everyone has different ideas about what good design is.
Right.
Clients a lot of freedom.
Right.
Do you kind of set up like a check-in system just to make sure that they're building along the right lines and they're not designing something silly? They have like governments.
Yeah, I mean, we definitely do kind of, as part of the process, we produce a style guide, and not a style guide different from what I'm talking about, kind of a brand guidelines thing for the document for the website that kind of outlines how we see things being used. And we also we're typically not the type of firm that builds and then goes away. So we typically host the site, do Drupal maintenance, and kind of stay involved. So we do typically kind of, ideally, we're kind of consulting with the client on an ongoing basis and doing those check-ins that you're describing. That's ideal. The other way this process really is interesting is that we found when we do this and we build the initial version of the site with the initial set of widgets, the client will come to us and say, hey, this other widget, I need that. And so that's pretty exciting, because they're thinking, I need another Lego. They're not thinking, I need another page. So that's really cool. But, and everyone's seen this. You do a design and you go away and the site looks like crap, like within 2 weeks. We've all been there, that happens. That can happen with this. We have not solved that problem. Like I have one client that we did the background thing and they like everything to be on a blue background. And I'm very like white, like Apple kind of style is my thing. So I just look at it, I'm like, oh my gosh, maybe we shouldn't have let them do this. But that's gonna happen. Whatever process we have, the client is gonna be the client. So they're going to use their taste. Yes?
I have a couple of questions. First is, what is the very first design deliverable that you show the client to kind of set direction?
Right.
And I guess in my experience when I've tried showing more like style files, people lack imagination and they don't really know what they're looking at.
Right.
So I'm curious how you guys solve that.
Well, we basically show, style tiles. We show mood boards. We call them mood boards, but it's basically we show different typography options, different color options, show kind of how the photos will work in that context, and then get initial feedback on that before we kind of do what I've described. And we do a lot of education. So, you know, typically what I'll do is I'll actually show clients deliverables from other projects and kind of walk through the back end and kind of give a holistic approach. Like, here's the process. Here's what a widget is. Here's what a style guide is. Here's how it's going to work in Drupal. Here's an example of the end product. So it's really an education issue. I will say there are certain clients that we've worked with that just don't get it. And it's just difficult. And I think you're always going to run into that, no matter how good a job you do. But I mean, what we try to do is really communicate and try to educate and do the best we can, but it's not perfect. So,
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
Just one more thing, to kind of piggyback on her question. Do you ever give clients guidelines about using the widgets, like only use one of these per page?
Yes.
The two,
Yeah.
put them next to each other.
We do.
Like that.
We do. There's a couple of things we do. So first of all, we do have traditional content types, and for some of the content types, we'll actually give them a structure for how the widgets are to appear. So we'll actually say this is going to have a visual header, and then it's going to have a text header, etc. And you can add other stuff below it, but these two things have to be there. And like for a press release or something like that, we really try to do that to provide structure. So I think that's one direction. We do some training and provide brand guidelines. That's another set of direction. So those are kind of the main things. And we do limit, like in some cases we'll limit them, like we don't want 2 of those visual headers on a page. So we will kind of set up the system not to allow, in some cases, those to be added. But again, the client, if they want to do something weird, they can, we're giving them the freedom to do that. It's kind of different. Like in the old way where we're doing page templates, they're probably going to do it in the body field. So they're just going to hack the body field and do something weird there. Here, now they may just put widgets together that we didn't envision. But yeah. Yes.
You showed the widgets in different widths or heights or touch.
We do, and I didn't go through this. What I've shown you obviously is primarily desktop. What we try to do is for the ones that are pretty obvious how the responsiveness is going to work, we don't. But for ones that are more intricate, we'll do kind of show a mobile fallback. So like as an example, that one I showed, that was the Park Interactive. There's a mobile fallback for that. So we do some mobile fallbacks. And there's other projects that are more mobile focused where we've actually done the widgets mobile and work backwards. So it just depends on the project. You gentleman up there.
So you mentioned that you guys use hologram as one of the sources of truth, kind of part of the deliverables package. Once the site's been wired up to Drupal and they're kind of playing around with it, polishing it, how do you guys make sure that that hologram source of truth piece stays up to date, stays relevant as this whole website evolves over time?
I'm not going to be able to answer that one. I'm sorry. If you give me your name after, I can get one of our front-end developers to get back to you. I'm not a front-end developer.
Sorry, but my question isn't the technical. It's more the process. How do you make sure that the work that you guys put into that deliverable stays relevant and doesn't just go in the trash afterwards?
I mean, I think it's basically, as I said, generally speaking, we're the ones developing the site on an ongoing basis. So we're always kind of going back to those fundamental materials. So the style guide that we create, both the online and the other version, is kind of the library. So anytime we're doing additional design, et cetera, we're kind of referencing those materials. So it's just kind of, it's not a good answer. It's just kind of having the discipline to use the materials that you created in the beginning. Yes. You.
So a lot of my clients have really deep drop down examples, but once you get 3 or 4 pages in, do you have any examples of how you deal with that really deep navigation with this widget system?
There are, so let me see if, I don't know if I have this right with me, but I'll just kind of talk conceptually. They have this parks section. And so they have these parks pages that are, that basically are like mini websites. So each park page will have a page about the park, they'll have a booking form, they'll have photos, etc. And so what we've done is, within this site, we've actually developed a secondary nav system that you can configure and turn on and off for each of the parks. So we anticipated that and created and created kind of a secondary nav system for those particular pages. We've also designed sites in the same manner that have breadcrumbs that are automatically created based on URL structure, etc. So yeah, exactly. Gentleman up there.
I'm more curious about, after you've done the style guide, you build things into Drupal, everything's all good, you have 6 variations of a button that you've made for them. 3 weeks before launch, they want some cool new button that's not in your style guide.
Right.
What is the process that you go through? Do you add it to the style guide, add it to the online style guide, get approval, and then it actually gets implemented? Or when you're dealing with when they want something different, even though you've given them 18 variations, is that a contract thing? Do you tell them no, only 2 revisions? How do you handle when they're just going to come back and be like, I want this, but different?
Right. From a process perspective, that initial style guide that I showed, the PSD of the style guide, that's thrown out the window once we built the site. So after that, we're working on an online style guide that exists, that's automatically created, that we reference. So if they come, have it right 2 weeks before launch, and they want to add a new button style, frankly, that's out of scope, and I should charge for it. I'd probably do it if it's an hour, which it probably is, and just kind of deal with it. You always have that happen, and you kind of, typically in our budgets, we build in time for that. That's kind of these little out of scope things. If it was a more significant change, obviously we'd have to charge and deal with it. So it's kind of, the process is very similar to, it's just client management. Same process you have with any client. Any other? Yes.
Have you worked with the client for this client in particular, migrating from an older site into this new new stack format?
Yes.
Widget format?
Yes. And, you have to recreate a lot of pages. We have been able, so for pages that are kind of where it's a structured page in a body field, like say a press release or a news article, what we've done is actually done the conversion, created the nodes in Drupal, and basically dumped the text or body field into the text widget and done that as the conversion. So we've really we've focused on figuring out ways, migration paths for content that's high in volume and is very structured. So we have done that. If it's a more visual page, we just throw it away and start over and rebuild it using our new system. So we have had to deal with that. This process does involve recreating a lot of pages, which I found pretty much if you're going from Drupal 6 to Drupal 7 or Drupal 7 to Drupal 8 or whatever is the process anyway. But you definitely have to redo pages. Yes?
Is it a custom entity type in your stats module?
I believe it is. And once again, I'm not a front-end developer, so feel free to grab my email and email me, and I can get a front-end developer to kind of answer more technical questions. Any other questions? Awesome. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.